Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Eversole, Chair of the House Delegation, Baltimore County House Delegation. Today, we're going to have a meeting where we're going to have a briefing from the Public Defender's Office relevant to some of the concerns at the County Detention Center. We had a briefing a couple of weeks ago from the gentleman who is in charge of the detention center, and some of the attention was brought by the Public Defender's Office, and we wanted to get them on here to give us a description of what their concerns are. We have with us Natasha Dartique, we have Deborah St. Jean, Michelle Kim, and Elizabeth Hilliard. They have great looking titles. Natasha is actually kind of our lead today. And so what I'm going to do is let them do a presentation, and we're going to open up some time for some questions. I think we have a pretty hard stop at about 9:45. We'll see if we can get everything in that we want to by then. I do want to tell everyone that this is a sensitive issue, and we are really trying to get a broader perspective by bringing the public defender here today. I'm eager to hear what they have to say, and we need to handle things delicately because we are talking about minors here. So with that, Natasha, I will be happy to turn it over to you. I believe Justin has made it possible for you to share a screen, and I think there's something that you would like to put in front of us.
Yes.
And thank you for coming. I'm sorry, I forgot to say thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. And I would ask if Elizabeth Hilliard would be given the ability to share her screen.
You asking should be enough. Justin will probably pick that right up for us.
Thank you so much. So while that is taking place, I would like to first say thank you. Thank you, Speaker Jones. Thank you, Chairman Eversole. Thank you to members of the delegation. I would also like to give a special shout out to Delegate Phillips, Delegate Pastor, Delegate McCaskill, Delegate White, and Senator Sidnor, especially for their continuing engagement with the Public Defender's Office. My thank yous today are especially for your understanding in terms of the urgency of the situation that was detailed in the letter dated March the 6th of 2023 from my office. And I want to highlight, as I begin speaking to you today, that the Office of the Public Defender has a unique and distinct perspective because we actually represent individuals. We actually represent the children that are the subject of the discussion. We have the special ability to inform you, but also others, not only how the policy works, but in terms of how the policy directly impacts and affects individuals on a daily basis. The Office of the Public Defender, as the premier criminal defense firm in the state of Maryland, is charged with the responsibility of advocating and defending the rights of marginalized individuals. Here today, we are going to amplify the voices of the children that we represent. And I make note that when we're speaking about the children in these facilities, we're talking predominantly about Black and Brown children. And this is therefore not a charge that we at the Office of the Public Defender take lightly. Our office operates and represents individuals in all 24 jurisdictions in the state of Maryland. Many of you probably familiar with our work in terms of the trial courts, in terms of our appellate work, in terms of our advocacy work through legislative affairs. But in addition to that, we have 11 specialty divisions that serve in tandem in some regions of the state, but also provide support in other regions of the state. And today in particular, we're going to be talking about the work of the Juvenile Protection Division of the Office of the Public Defender. I brought with me today three members of my team that will address some very important points. And that is my director of the Juvenile Protection Division, Ms. Debbie St. Jean, who is in fact the author of the letter dated March the 6th of 2023. I also have with me today one of my lead attorneys out of the Juvenile Division in Baltimore County, who in fact represents some of the children that we are speaking of today. I also have with me today my Acting Director of Legislative Affairs, Government Relations, Elizabeth Hilliard. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with Elizabeth. So with that, I will no longer delay and immediately turn it over for background and a deep dive into the current situation to my director, Debbie St. Jean.
Good morning. Under Maryland law, children as young as 14 can be charged as adults and detained pre-trial in adult detention centers. In 2015, the law changed, making it mandatory that children charged as adults be held in juvenile facilities, and that's pursuant to the criminal procedure statute. When that statute was enacted, the Baltimore County State's Attorney agreed that the law mandates all juveniles charged as adults be held in a juvenile facility pending a decision on the reverse waiver. Despite, next slide, please, Ms. Hilliard. Despite these legislative efforts, many children still remain in the adult jails. The 2015 law has an exception. If a judge finds a child's detention in a secure juvenile facility that would pose a risk to the child or others, that child can remain in the adult detention center. The 2015 law makes juvenile custody the default for children who are transfer eligible, but left that loophole. This exception results in geographic differences in practice in an application. The law does not protect children who are not transfer eligible. Next slide, thank you. Due to this loophole, the courts can still send kids to the adult jails when the state's attorney requests, which leads to the differences in the practice and application. Baltimore County is the outlier in large jurisdictions for the number of kids in adult court. As you can see from the stats, Baltimore County has 25%, Prince George is 17%, Baltimore City 25%. This is the largest number of children in the adult court. To give you an idea of how many children this actually affects, according to GOCAP statistics, between fiscal year 2018 and 2022, Maryland charged 3,923 children in adult court. Baltimore City was responsible for 1,009 of those cases, Baltimore County 994 of those cases, and Prince George's County 677. The factors contributing to the disparity include Baltimore City utilizes a institution called the Youthful Defendant Center. And this is a result of a 2016 sort of understanding and use of a statute that allowed that transfer to occur. The policies of the state's attorneys differ by jurisdictions. For example, in the last month, 100% of the bail reviews, 6 out of 6 of children charged in the adult court was requested by the Baltimore County State's Attorney. Next slide, please. We conducted 2 investigations at BCDC, one in 2018 and one again in 2022. Different youth separated by years with strikingly consistent and similar concerns were the same issues raised over and over. These concerns also were corroborated by personnel from uncuffed ministries. Uncuffed ministries are actually with youth on the tiers inside the Baltimore County Detention Center. Their written testimony from 2019 is included in your packet. Initially, children housed in the intake unit with adults while awaiting assignment to a housing tier, the following problems were observed. They don't leave their cell, they don't attend school, they don't have access to the showers, they sleep on the floor if there are no bunks, and they reported mice running in and out. Doctors are only available upon request, and sometimes children wait a week to a month to see a doctor, and they're charged $4 for a visit, pursuant to a COMAR regulation. On the housing tier, children are held in their cells for 23 hours a day. There is no recreation area, and they are not permitted to go outside. Next slide. You'll see portions of an affidavit in white from the former director of BCDC, Ms. Gail Watts. This was an affidavit that was prepared as a result of the 2018 investigation that we did at the jail, wherein there's an acknowledgement that they can't provide the services that are needed. It's not safe. They can't provide education or rehabilitative efforts, and that they're at greater risk of harm for abuse and sexual assault. That affidavit too is included in your packet in its entirety. We are currently, the Office of the Public Defender is currently in the process of submitting MPIA requests to each county detention center throughout the state of Maryland, seeking information regarding the same conditions that we looked at in Baltimore County, the sight and sound separation of children in adult facilities. Adult jails just aren't designed to be holding children. They have various structural problems. In speaking, there are 3 quotes from various wardens across the state of Maryland talking about these problems. As early as, I'd say, probably 3 days ago, in speaking to authorities at the Charles County Detention Center, they fully acknowledge that they are not equipped to deal with children, that it is something that's put upon them. And they're sort of in a catch-22. They just don't have the facilities or staff to actually house these children safely. I think now it is Miss Kim's turn.
Thank you, Ms. St. Jean. So this slide just goes to, oh, okay, I guess we're going to go to this one. So our letter simply confirmed what we in Baltimore County have seen for years in talking with hundreds of children who have been held at the Baltimore County Detention Center, who have independently confirmed the conditions that were reported in that letter. Of important note is that 90%, over 90% of children who are charged as adults in Baltimore County are children of color, and that disparity, that extreme disparity, continues across the board. So that does include the children who are held at the jail are also going to be over 90% Black and brown children. So these bullet points are from redacted jail reports that are provided to you in your packet. One child reporting that he refused to enter the vacant cell chosen for him because it's covered in feces all over the walls and floors. Another child was experiencing extreme emotional and mental distress with cuts to her forearm, complaints of hearing voices, and being prevented from wearing clothing. And a note on that, which I think is a little underreported, is that children at the jail, when they are in extreme distress and have expressed suicidal ideation, are taken to suicide watch, which the people at the jail colloquially call the butt naked room, because they are stripped of all their clothing. They're not given underwear, they're not given bedding, they're given a plastic blanket, no mattress, because of the worries of self-harm, and they sit in that room in solitary confinement until they're cleared by staff to return to the regular unit. When our client asked about being moved from solitary conditions, she was told that because there was no other female juveniles at the facility, and the jail must take appropriate precautions to keep her safe, she had to remain in solitary confinement. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. And so for further confirmation, we have notes from some of the interviews that we did with our kids at BCDC. So this child was wearing the same underwear that he arrived in a week ago. He has been at BCDC since last Thursday. He's able to change his jumpsuit only once. He took a shower 2 days ago. It was the only shower he had been able to take since arriving at BCDC, and it had been a week. There are mice everywhere. They scurry under the cell doors. They sleep on mattresses on the floor, and that makes the rodent problem even more problematic. And they talk about the boats on the floors. One time he told staff that he refused to be locked down in a particular cell unless they cleaned it, and they actually did that. But when they moved him into his current cell, the toilet was clogged. They unclogged it and left the dirty toilet paper that had been clogging the toilet on the floor of the cell, and was locked in the cell from Monday 3:30 a.m. until this morning, Wednesday at 5 a.m. So we have granular specification as to what our kids have to endure when they're at this jail. And I want to make clear that fixing the situation is not what we're looking for. The overwhelming theme of what we've presented to here today indicates that these children should not be stepping foot inside this jail. There are better alternatives, and that's what we're going to ask this delegation to consider today. One other thing that I would like to note is that we have a mother of a child who was recently at the Baltimore County Detention Center who suffered from extreme deterioration of her mental condition, who would want to share her experience with members of this delegation when given the right opportunity. So if this delegation is interested in reaching out to impacted people in their community, please let us know and we'll make that meeting happen. Thank you so much.
So what can be done now? You as members of the delegation are empowered and able to effectuate change and can do so now. You can do so by one, establishing a task force that is charged with effectuating the immediate transfer of children out of Baltimore County Detention Center. We ask that you strongly urge Director Pesterfield to enter into a memorandum of understanding for the movement of children who are not transfer eligible to be sent to YDC. You can also establish a work group that routinely monitors the status of children that are in custody. What that would entail: requesting bi-weekly status reports addressing the following issues. For example, what is the total number of hours that children are spending in their cells in a 24-hour period? What times of the day are children out of their cells? What activities are available to children during the time that they are actually out of the cell? You can request a daily accounting of the time spent outdoors. You can also request daily and weekly accounting of school instruction. And that school instruction must include, but is not limited to, IEP, individualized educational programs. What you can also do immediately is engage in frequent conversations such as this with other elected officials. We're talking about the district and circuit court judges, the state's attorneys. You can continue, and we would facilitate and hope that we continue to engage in conversations such as this with us, the Office of the Public Defender, but also engage with other criminal justice stakeholders to ensure that the mandates of the criminal procedure, Section 202H, that requires the housing of children in DJS facilities are adhered to as the legislature intended. I also ask that you look to make changes that would have effect in terms of the long term. And that requires the passage of legislation that fully ensures that no child is caged in a Baltimore County Detention Center, but not caging children in any adult facility in the state. You must work towards the passage of the YES Act. Adult jails do not have the capacity to house or respond to the needs of children. If children are removed from their homes, if children are removed from the community, the state, and essentially you as members of the delegation have an absolute duty of care to keep the children safe, to provide basic and special education, as well as provide needed treatment. And in terms of all of this, as we present them, the Office of the Public Defender wishes to continue to engage and collaborate with you in ways to make that happen. On this last slide, I say thank you again for the opportunity to engage. We are now open to questions, and this is our contact information.
And thank you all for that, I would say, riveting report. Several parts of that I know that we had heard before, but there's some new information there. I was disturbed to see that these 3 jurisdictions have over 2/3 of the juvenile detainees in the state. Pretty large number, all considered. I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to let a couple of my delegates go first and see if they ask them. If they don't, I'll add mine on at the end. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of you for this presentation and for your work. So we keep hearing that it's really up to a judge in terms of whether children are in this facility, but doesn't the state's attorney also play a role in terms of providing that they can oppose or support whether the child should be in this facility or not?
That is absolutely true. And I will ask Ms. Kim to speak specifically about Baltimore County.
Thank you so much, Delegate Ruth, and good to see you. And yes, Delegate Ruth, that's absolutely correct. The state's attorney's office is a main driver behind the requests to the courts to use that exception to get around the mandate that children who are charged as adults be held in juvenile facilities pending their transfer hearing. So the discrepancies we see across jurisdictions are mostly driven by the push or lack of push by the state's attorney's office. And here we have an active state's attorney's office who regularly requests that children charged as adults remain in adult jails.
Thank you.
And I would highlight, even with that you as members of the delegation do have power to effectuate change. And essentially it's engaging in the conversations, as we said, and passing legislation that essentially covers that loophole that exists. We found, and Ms. Kim, I would ask you, in terms of March of 2023, what was the state's position? I think that's important that we highlight that in terms of these situations when the request was made for children.
Absolutely. So we found 6 cases in which children were charged as adults. They were denied transfer to a juvenile facility at the district court level. And then when the attorneys for these children requested another bail review before the circuit court judges, the state's attorney's office opposed all 6 of those requests.
And
that's contrary to what perhaps has been stated or testified to would be their policy.
Okay.
Thank
Delegate
you.
Ruth, did you have a follow-up?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Carden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Natasha, for being here. Appreciate the comprehensive report. 2 quick questions. The first is, from what I'm hearing, so first of all, the judiciary does have the final say and has the discretion. So perhaps we should also be, regardless of what the state's attorney recommends, which is an independent, office. So perhaps we should be also meeting with the judiciary to find out sort of what tools they need to be able to make independent decisions. That's number 1. Number 2 is, in the short term, it sounds to me like there's just no facilities available in Baltimore County right now. So over the next few months, if we are deciding if we're legislatively going to try and correct any issues that you believe are there, what do we do over the next 3-6 months when we really don't have any other options? And then I have one additional question, Mr. Chair, if I can. You want me to give it now or you want me to wait?
Yeah, go ahead and pile it on and see if they go
Okay.
to run together.
I've been reading about, and this is tangentially related, that you don't, while you visit these clients at the jail, you have not begun since pre-COVID to visit clients at Sheppard Pratt. And I just got this letter from Sheppard Pratt to you saying, we think the clients that are being housed at Sheppard Pratt are not being treated in the same way because they don't have in-person visits and they're not getting the adequate representation. I'm wondering if you can talk about when you might be able to go back to in-person visits at that institution.
Had I known there were such different questions, I might. But see if you guys can address both of those, please.
So I can specifically address in regards to children. When we're speaking about Sheppard Pratt, we're speaking about adults. So I cannot comment in terms of, and I don't want to just blatantly comment. I want to be factually accurate when I comment. So I'm not prepared to comment in terms of Sheppard Pratt.
You can get back to me, that's fine.
But and most definitely. But in regards to the children, you do have the ability in terms of immediate action. So like when we when I spoke, and we will present you with copies of our PowerPoint, but you do have the ability to enter into an MOU with Director Pesterfield for the immediate movement of children who are not transfer eligible. You have the power and the ability to do that. You also have the power and ability to immediately establish a work group that monitors children that are currently held, right? Because there is an urgency in the situation. So we must look to as to what we're going to be able to do today and all the days moving forward. I would also give the opportunity, Ms. St. Jean, to chime in terms of that response as well.
And I also see that Ms. Kim has her hand up. You don't have to put your hand up here as long as your boss lets you here. You
Oh,
can
absolutely.
you can kick in on a question answer whenever you feel it's appropriate to.
Just a point of clarification, we're talking about two classes of children. We're talking about children who are eligible to be transferred and have a transfer hearing. That's a hearing wherein the court decides what jurisdiction the kid is going to be ending up in. Those children can be safely housed. Literally, I don't know the exact mileage, but it's in Baltimore County in Parkville. It's the Hickey School. That's a detention center that is a jail. It is a hardware secure jail. The difference is that it's for children. The services are completely different. If you look at the standards for adult detention as opposed to juvenile detention, I could find 6 different standards, 6 different policies in the Department of Corrections, the DPSCS, as opposed to the 278-page assessment instrument for juvenile detention facilities. It is comprehensively different, and it is to protect the children. The second group are the children that are not eligible for transfer. Those children, if they're found guilty according to the crime that they're charged with, and they're at the age that is 16 or 17, those children go immediately to the Youth Defendant Center. That's part of DPSCS. That's where they're going to go if they're convicted. So I'm not quite sure what the hesitancy is in moving them currently when they're arrested and charged as an adult and they're 16 or 17 for a rape, a murder, a first-degree assault. Those children aren't eligible for transfer. So they're going to end up in YDC anyway. So getting that, and that's exactly what Baltimore City did. They developed this understanding between the public defender, the state's attorney, and the courts that when those children are charged, they go to YDC. And no small matter, they have an excellent school there. I mean, just an excellent school. With regard to Shepherd Pratt, there are, in fact, children housed there. We can only go and speak to the children that we represent, that the Office of the Public Defender represents. So we may, in fact, not have anybody there currently at the moment. But I've spent many occasions in Shepherd Pratt. And yes, we go and we talk. Their conditions are, they're actually certified under the Office of Healthcare Quality, and they have standards that they apply to. We've never really had an issue with Shepherd Pratt. Unlike Baltimore County, we've had a long-standing one since 2018. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Cardin.
Thank you, Delegate Cardin, for the questions. I'm going to recognize Delegate Phillips next. Before he starts asking, I want to credit him with helping us to facilitate the communication with the Public Defender's Office. I appreciate his help. And he's part of the reason we're here today. Thank you very much. And please, Delegate, your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing, I don't practice in this area, but clearly it seems to me that the process of determining where these young people go is broken. So you mentioned that the district court is the first stop, right? And so a district court judge can remand a child to the youth detention center, could send them to the Hickey School, or could send them to the Baltimore County detention. Is that correct?
Thank you, Delegate Phillips. As it stands, YDC is a Baltimore City It's in Baltimore City, so none of our children in Baltimore County are able to go to YDC without some kind of MOU.
And so we don't have an MOU with YDC today?
We do not.
I didn't understand. I didn't know that. How do our numbers compare in terms of when a district court judge makes a decision of where the child is going to go before it gets to the circuit court? How does it compare to other jurisdictions? Because I'm like Delegate Cardin. It seems to me that we've got kind of several issues, whether it's the state's attorney arguing against, it's district court judges sending, it's circuit court judges sending. Can you tell me how our court systems compare to the other jurisdictions around the state?
So Delegate Phillips, we're going to try to get some firm answers about this. What I will say is Baltimore City does not have at the district court level any children going to an adult facility because they have the youth detention center. So the children who are charged as adults in Baltimore City go to the youth detention center, and some of them get moved to the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center to await their transfer hearings. So Baltimore County remains an outlier in terms of the major jurisdictions about the number of children who are denied that move to a juvenile facility and who are placed in adult court. So a lot of that, the kind of first gatekeeping method is what you've correctly identified as the district court judges. And then for those kids who remain at the jail, their attorneys file another bail review before the circuit court. And the circuit court judges can also determine whether or not they're going to move those children.
So how do we compare to a county that's similar in size, Montgomery County?
So I'm going to say that Baltimore County has more children in the adult jail than any major jurisdiction in Maryland. We know this because we charge more kids as adults here in Baltimore County. Baltimore City and Baltimore County are regularly 1 and 2 in terms of that list. So we charge more children as adults in these two jurisdictions, and Baltimore City does not place children in adult jail.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I may have requested a second bite at the apple, but I'm a little frustrated this morning.
What you're famous for, getting your hand in there at the end too, Delegate. I appreciate that. I have a quick question. I've heard two things talked about: the Baltimore City Youth Detention Center and the Hickey School. I think I heard Ms. St. Jean refer to it as a defendant center. Which one are we? I feel like we've conflated them a bit here. Would we be able to, if we had an MOU, access the Baltimore City Youth Detention Center?
Yes.
Okay.
The Youth Defendant Center is actually part of DPSCS. It's part of the Division of Corrections.
Where is that located?
It's on Greenmont Avenue in Baltimore City.
Okay, so that's the one that you're referring to at the city, where the city houses their youth charged as adults.
Yes. And the Hickey School is a DJS detention center specifically for children. They have just a much wider and deeper ability to care for these kids in every regard.
My question is twofold. Could Baltimore County establish a MOU, a relationship with the detention center in the city? And would they probably or possibly be able to manage the number of people that we would be sending to them? And then the other part of the question is how would the Hickey School figure into that? Would they perhaps be willing, or could they also house youth charged as adults?
Oh,
Before you, Ms. St. Jean, I just want to make one important distinction.
Yeah, please do.
In terms of why DC, that is simply where it is located. That is not a facility that is strictly for children that are charged in Baltimore City. That is simply where it is located. Ms. St. Jean?
And that's set up then to handle youths in a way that is consistent with the law in terms of keeping them separate from adults.
exactly.
It's at the same location, but it's obviously a separate, at least it's separate. It's able to separate these youths who are charged as adults.
Yes, it is to comply with OJJDP's sound and sight separation and the inuring of federal funds. Yes, exactly set up for that.
And if I briefly answer the second part of your question. So we're talking about children who are transfer eligible. and children who aren't transfer eligible. And the children who aren't transfer eligible can be safely and within compliance of the federal law housed at YDC, which again is a DPSCS run facility, DPSCS being a statewide agency. So you all establishing an MOU to send children who are not transfer eligible to YDC would be, well within their purview as a state agency. The second piece of it, and you asked about the Hickey School, is DJS. And that is where transfer eligible kids can and should be sent. And in fact, in the last, I believe, at least 4 hearings that we've had for transfer eligible children, DJS has had someone come and testify to explain that they can and will appropriately house these children, and that they have the facilities, they have the space, and they have the capacity to hold these children. So DJS is saying that they are more than welcome to take them, and the adult detention centers are saying that they cannot house them. Certainly for the transfer eligible kids, we should be sending them immediately to DJS, which is a decision the judges can make and is also something that the state's attorneys can advocate for. And obviously we advocate for. And then for the adults, setting up that MOU, for the non-transfer eligible children, setting up that MOU and allowing them to be placed at YDC instead of the adult facility is the best immediate solution.
Okay, thank you for some clarity on that. I'm going to turn to Delegate McCaskill for her question, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Scott, for getting this together so quickly. And thank you so much to you, Natasha, and your office. I have 2 quick questions because actually Delegate Phillips touched on what I wanted to ask, and that is, are any of the juveniles that's in the adult detention center now transfer eligible? Do we know if any of them are transfer eligible?
Ms. Kim?
Yes, there are. Thank you, Delegate McCaskill. There are. And I would also like to note that we have done interviews with some of the children who are still there or who have left very recently. And something that I think is noteworthy is we've asked them, how many hours do you spend in your cell? What do you do in your time off? What are the conditions there? So one of our youth indicated that they usually spend 23 hours a day in their cell. They have 1 hour out where they're expected to use a phone, use a shower. They do not have physical exercise or recreation. And this youth said, we did not have physical exercise until last week. Until last week, we had no gym. We were never outside. And they're kind of dating when conditions changed. This youth said last week, how did they change? We had gym time for about 45 minutes. We were out of our cells for school.
Excuse me,
I'm
I
sorry.
think the question was simply how many transfer eligible students are there? We heard some of this testimony earlier about the conditions. And I
Yes,
appreciate
just
you-
really briefly, I just want to say that the conditions are still ongoing.
Right.
However, this youth indicated that they have been let out of their cells more frequently now in about a week, and we got a microwave and ice machine yesterday.
Good. I guess
Okay.
that's something.
The-
Delegate McCaskill, did you get your question answered?
Not really, but the other question is, it's really disturbing to also find out that we don't have an MOU with YDC. Do you all know when was the last time we had an MOU? How long it's been?
We've never had an MOU with YDC.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate McCaskill, for your question. Ms. Kim, thank you for your answers. I just wanted to make sure we stayed on point. We're starting to look at the end of our time frame here. So I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure we got all of our questions answered. And here comes another one from the wonderful Delegate White, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all so much for being here. Some of my questions were answered, but I do have one that I'll pick up from where Delegate McCaskill left off. But it makes sense, and it seems to me that an MOU with YDC, as you all elevated, it would be needed here. What have these barriers been in moving in that direction and establishing this MOU? And just real quickly, I'm curious, given some of these stories that you have shared and this anecdotal evidence about these conditions, I'm curious about the accountability mechanism and how, if there is a way for our youth in recognizing that many of these conditions, translates to further harm and trauma, especially as it relates to their mental health and well-being. What are the ways in which that these grievances can be addressed internally? How do they elevate this, and what ways in which that they are addressed here? How does that accountability mechanism, either through an ombudsman or some sort of a way, how does that work, and does that exist? And I wonder if that is another area for us to also examine, and not just increase in improving the conditions, but what does that accountability mechanism look like? So just two questions there about how do we get to that MOU, what have the barriers been, and as it relates to the accountability mechanism with elevating the grievances.
If I may briefly speak to the accountability mechanism, our office has supported the correctional ombudsman bill for many years now, and that the correctional ombudsman bill would include DPSCS facilities. So that would include YDC at this time. It would not include local facilities. We don't have an accountability mechanism for local facilities in place at this time. But we are hopeful that once the Correctional Ombudsman Office is established, it can provide that oversight, and we can expand it to provide oversight to the local detention centers. And then for the DJS facilities, they already have an oversight office. They have a juvenile justice monitor who regularly checks the conditions and visits. And, certainly we encourage everyone to go visit the facilities, but those oversight offices and those monitors do have more unfettered access and are able to see the conditions in a more realistic setting on a day-to-day basis. So we would encourage the correctional ombudsman, the passage of that, obviously, and the eventual inclusion of local facilities in that, because that would provide significant opportunities for oversight. As to the first question, I will let Ms. Kim answer that.
So I'm actually going to defer to Ms. St. Jean, just because an MOU would be unprecedented here. And I'm not exactly sure about the players that would have to get on board, just because historically YDC has been solely used for Baltimore City youth, and rarely, I think, Ms. St. Jean, correct me if I'm wrong, for kids in other counties.
You're not entirely wrong. YDC has children that are there that have been sentenced to the Division of Corrections from across the state that are under the age of 18. So there are kids there from all different counties. With regard to an MOU, it would be involving the Secretary of DPSCS and probably the Baltimore County Public Schools, and because they're the provider of education at the Baltimore County Detention Center, and they would be involved with providing education to Baltimore County residents. And then of course, it would have to be with the Baltimore County Detention Center. But there's a statute that we referenced, and I think it's in the Correctional Services article, I think it's 9303, that allows the Commissioner of Corrections, the DPSCS, to decide that they're going to take a youth out of a local county detention center because the county detention center cannot provide the appropriate services or education or that type of thing. So there's a statute that already allows this to happen, but it would be really the MOU would make it a little more seamless. In other words, the kid is charged. If they're charged as an adult and they're not transfer eligible with this memorandum of understanding, they need not ever go to the Baltimore County Detention Center. They would go directly to the Youth Defendant Center on Greenmont Avenue.
No, thank you. And I want to be cognizant of time. Ms. Dartigue, when we talked yesterday, I said we try to finish by 1:45, and we're there. I see 2 more hands up, and I'd be happy to entertain them if you think you can stay on for another 5 minutes or so with us.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go to, the name reads differently, but we're going to go to Delegate Pasteur. I think she's on her aide's computer there. So this says Renee Yarborough Williams, but she's actually Delegate Pasteur. Delegate Pasteur, your question, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here and taking this time and answering our questions. So I'm not going to go back over all of the deplorable conditions or all of the things that need to happen and hopefully will happen. So right now, we know that the things that need to happen and will happen are not going to happen today. They're not even going to happen next week. So we have children who are in an adult facility. And I'm just going to say that I have double digits numbers of years in Baltimore County as an administrator in tough schools where some of our children have been incarcerated and just got off a school board. And I should have said that last week whenever it was when we spoke to the person who's over the prisons now, so that we know that I sort of really do know the answer to this, but I need some more update here about what is happening with our children. I know in Baltimore County, we offer educational services, but the services that we offer to those who are incarcerated in an adult facility is very different from what I'm talking about in terms of those who are youth and who might well, if not soon, later, come back to a Baltimore County facility school system, and they are missing the up close and personal instruction that they need to have now. And I'm real familiar with it, having been an administrator, so I know the fight we have had along the journey to make sure our children are educated in a way that makes them seamlessly come back to us, because if they don't, they come back to a school or back to the environment and the business starts all over again. That trail to further incarceration starts over again. We know that whether they're in a juvenile facility, but especially if they're in one with adults, they need special, not what they do, as we were told before, at intake. I'm talking about social, emotional, psychological services that are given to them because they're children. Can you help me to know what is on board now that is going to meet those needs, about which I am almost insanely expressing to you this morning? It's a good thing I've been to the prayer breakfast this morning.
Miss St. Jean.
The Baltimore County Detention Center, from the youth that we spoke to through both investigations, do not receive mental health counseling. At best, if they are exhibiting extreme circumstances, they will be put into what Ms. Kim described as the butt naked room.
Yes.
And that's it. As compared to juvenile detention facilities, they have staff there. All of their staff are trained in trauma-informed care, even the residential aides. They have counselors there that can address that. They can see a psychiatrist for medication management. And this was the most shocking thing that I heard. And I know this sounds really like crazy, but they have to pay $4 at the detention center to see a doctor. Some of these children are there, are part of the CINA, Children in Need of Assistance. So they don't really have a parent. They have a social worker from the Department of Social Services. And if they don't have the $4, that's the first question that the correctional officers will ask a youth. Do you have $4 to see a doctor? There are kids there that some of their medications aren't actually given to them. There's a really extreme example of a youth that had epilepsy and was denied Dilantin, had multiple seizures in the jail. So they are something bad is going to happen over there. And that's the thing that weighs on our conscience, because
Something bad is happening to them now. I'm just gonna step away from this because this is ridiculous, and we can't just keep talking about this. Then we've got to figure out as a delegation what we can do to make this work now. This is unconscionable.
Thank you, Delegate. We can tell that certainly she has an emotional involvement and it's reasonable. Delegate Bhandari.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this update. I was reading the letter the Director of Baltimore County Department of Corrections sent it, stating that the administration's here, they're concerned and will investigate the claims raised in the letter. So could anybody highlight that what measure will the Baltimore County Department of Corrections take to improve condition of young inmates at the Baltimore County Detention Center as requested by Office of Public Defender, Juvenile Protection Division? And what is your conversation? We are committed to work with the Baltimore County government. Could anybody highlight what is your late communication with our county government?
So I just want to first highlight that structurally, the Baltimore County Detention Center does not have the ability to adequately house or provide services to children, period. Structurally, that is non-existent. So I definitely want to emphasize that and make that clear. And then I will pass it on to Ms. St. Jean to really speak more in detail.
It is in writing these letters, it really was, and sending them to the people that we sent them to. It was our intention to raise the notice that what Ms. Dartigue is saying, you don't have the capacity. If you speak honestly to other wardens in other counties at adult detention centers, they will tell you just that. They aren't set up to house these children. They don't know how to deal with these children. They don't offer any of the services that will actually rehabilitate and actually service their physical, educational, and emotional needs. It's not going to happen at Baltimore County Detention Center. And that isn't, we don't want to say that these people are evil or any of that. They physically cannot do it. And they will admit that privately. And so what our concern is that, by raising these conditions and raising the sort of public information about how these kids are kept, it would precipitate a change, and the changes that Ms. Dartigue has suggested that we would like to see happen. Move these kids out.
Okay, so, and thank you. One last question. We've talked a lot about Baltimore City, and you highlighted Prince George's County. Without a great deal of detail, how are they managing similar situations in a county like Prince George's, for example?
So I want to make sure that I can verify this, but based on my conversations with the supervisor of the Juvenile Public Defender Unit in Prince George's, the state's attorney's office in Prince George's does not contest the move of children charged as adults to juvenile facilities. So any transfer eligible child in Prince George's is also placed in a juvenile facility.
Some other juvenile facility, okay.
Yes.
That is your belief that that's pretty universal with them.
Yes.
That is my understanding currently what is happening in Prince George's County.
I just use them as an example because you highlighted them at the beginning
objection.
as one of the ones that also has a large number of youth charged as adults. And so I was just curious if we talked about the city, just another point of comparison, just to get a sense of what's going on in other parts of the state. And I thought that was a good comparison since they have a large number of students also, or I say students, I'm a teacher, sorry, youth in this particular case. I don't see any more questions. And I want to say I greatly appreciate your forthright descriptions and your proactive suggestions for things that can be done. I think you have a number of delegates, and I saw Senator Hedelman, she took her hand down, but we have senators on board also who are concerned about these youth. And I think that this information will hopefully be in some ways, in many ways, perhaps a call to action for the delegation. This does not have to end our communication. And I appreciate the time that you have all given us. I know you have jobs to do. Giving us information is part of that, and it's great, but also you have to get back to work. And I thank all the delegates and senators for being here and those who asked questions for their thoughtful questions and insights. And with that, I'm going to call this meeting to a close. And thank you all very much. And I'll see you on the floor, some of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, can I just mention one thing to the Baltimore
Yes.
County delegates?
It wouldn't be right if you didn't, man.
I know, I'm sorry. But Hernwood Elementary School, a Baltimore County elementary school, will be bringing their fifth graders here today. They're supposed to arrive at about 10:20. And yes, that's my daughter's class.
Thank you very much, delegate. We'll see you soon.